My name is Stephen Males. My job title is that I'm a Lord Justice of Appeal, which means I'm a judge who sits in the Court of Appeal dealing with appeals from lower courts in both civil and criminal cases. Before that, High Court judge for 6 years, barrister and QC for over 30 years. I grew up in the home counties, moving around quite a lot whenever my father, who worked for Sainsbury's, changed jobs. He got promoted to another branch, we upped sticks and moved to another house and another school. But I was eventually educated at a number of state schools, and I knew from quite an early stage that I wanted a career in the law, even though none of my family were lawyers. So I went on to study law at university before being called to the bar. I've been a Christian for many years. When I was a boy, I remember being sent kicking and screaming to Sunday school, and the nuns, I was then a Roman Catholic, said that they would pray for me to have a priestly vocation. Well, that worked out well, didn't it? But they were some of those who have nudged me along the way in my journey, to whom, although I didn't really appreciate it much at the time, I'm now immensely grateful. As a judge, it's been my job to listen to the evidence in a case and to reach a conclusion about what happened or didn't happen at some time in the past, when obviously people are in dispute about it. One party says that an agreement was reached to sell a consignment of oil for $10 million. The other side say that the agreement was conditional on all sorts of things and not a final agreement. Well, how do I decide? I wasn't there. I don't know. How can I say who's right about that? Well, the judge doesn't just throw his hands up in the air and give up. He looks at the evidence. What are the witnesses saying who were there? What were they saying to each other at the time, or to other people? What, if anything, did they put in writing about what had or had not been agreed and about what had happened? How did they behave, both before and afterwards? What are the inherent probabilities in all the circumstances of the case? That's the evidence, the raw material which has to be examined and tested. You don't just accept it at face value, you test it by asking searching questions. We call that cross-examination, to see to what extent it stands up, to what extent it is consistent with one side's or the other side's case and their version of events. And then you decide what things you can be sure about and what they tell you about the reliability of other evidence in the case. And you gradually work through it, and that process enables a conclusion to be reached in which you can usually be confident that you've got the right answer. Or it may be a more complex issue. Let me tell you about one case I tried, a tragic case in which 4 children died in a house fire. Now, I don't have the technical expertise to look at the ashes and the debris and the smoke damage after there's been such a fire and it's all eventually been extinguished in order to say where it started or how long it had been going before it managed to fuse the lights and the whole house was in blackness, let alone to say whether it was started deliberately. But there are experts who do know about these things, who can examine the end state after the fire has been extinguished, and who can give evidence about what they have found, and why that leads them to the conclusion that the fire was started deliberately in an upstairs bedroom by somebody setting light to children's clothing, which was hanging in a wardrobe. Why somebody would do that, who knows, but they could say that's what happened. They could even say that the fire must have been started by setting light to the clothing which was hanging on this side of the wardrobe rather than that side. And that evidence was subjected to the highest degree of critical scrutiny. It was a murder case, so that's what happens. And in the end, there was no doubt about it, and the jury convicted. Now, some of you will have served on a jury and will have experienced what I'm talking about. You will have known nothing about the case before you went into court. You won't have known the people involved in it. You will have sworn an oath or made an affirmation to decide the case according to the evidence. Even though you weren't there, you have no first-hand knowledge of it. You will have been told that before you can convict the defendant, you must be sure that he's guilty, and that to decide this, you must concentrate on the evidence and put out of your mind any emotions or sympathies that you may have. You'll have been told also that you don't have to tie up all the loose ends, and there may be some points where it is not possible to reach a conclusion, but that what matters is whether on the critical questions you can be sure that the defendant is guilty. And as you will know if you've done it, and even if you haven't, you can imagine it, that can be a very daunting task when you know that the result of your decision may be that somebody is sent to prison for a very long time. How can anybody do that? How can anybody be sure about that? Well, defendants are convicted because when juries see the evidence weighed and tested, they are satisfied that it is sufficiently reliable that they can be sure. And that is a process in which, on the whole, people have confidence. It's fair, it's objective, and it leads to conclusions which we regard as reliable. And that is also the process which has persuaded me that there is a creator God. It's the result of evaluating the evidence, which consists of the evidence of witnesses who described and wrote down what they saw, the way they behaved as a result of their experiences, the inherent probabilities of the case, and indeed the experiences of my own life. I would not want to have a faith just because it was cozy or comfortable. I would not want to have a faith which does not stand up to critical examination. Faith is about much more than intellectual beliefs, but unless it is true, it doesn't amount to anything. And speaking for myself, I find the evidence for a creator God, and indeed the historical facts about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ to be compelling. So it's a big question. Is it true? And for that we have to look, all of us, with an open mind at the evidence.